Okay, so yesterday, AOC went on her Instagram, the Honorable Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, D-Twitch. She went on her Instagram, which is the place to make very serious allegations, is Instagram. And she talked about her experiences during the day. There are a couple controversial things that she said in here. Let me start with what is uncontroversial. It has got to be a horrifying experience. If you're a member of Congress, you are rushed out of your office to an alternative site because rioters have stormed the Capitol. So I'm not going to doubt that she was freaked out. The one part of the story that's a little bit humorous is that she landed in the office of Representative Katie Porter, and she said that Katie Porter was sitting there sipping coffee and basically waiting for all of it to end. So kudos to Katie Porter. In any case, AOC describes those experiences, but then she goes on to do a couple of things that are pretty unpleasant. One is that she suggests that when a Capitol police officer arrived in her office to warn her to go to someplace else. Now, the rioters never actually got into her office, to be clear. A Capitol police officer arrived in her office and told her that she needed to rush out of her office and get to someplace safer. When the Capitol police officer arrived, she suggested that she had doubts whether he was actually a Capitol police officer because he was flustered and because he was white. And that was something that she said, which, I mean, again, I don't think now is the time to actually be like crapping all over the Capitol Police who are doing their jobs and protecting members of Congress. But I guess that it is not foreign to Democrats, unfortunately, to crap all over the police at every available opportunity. In any case, AOC talks about that. But the parts, again, that are legit when she talks about being scared and traumatized. I've been in the middle of difficult situations, not to this extent, obviously, but I've been at the center of situations where I'm speaking and we require 600 police officers in order to guard my speech at Berkeley, or I've been in the middle of a quasi-riot, like a small-scale riot over at Cal State Los Angeles, where we required police officers and people were banging on the doors. It's not pleasant. It's not pleasant. And this must have been way more unpleasant than that, right? I mean, this must have been truly scary, obviously. I mean, there were people there who were baying for blood and injuring police officers. So, I mean, this was way worse than anything I've ever had to experience. So I don't doubt that her trauma and experiences are real here. Where she goes next, that's where I have some problems. So here's what Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez had to say on her stream last night.
These folks who tell us to move on, that it's not a big deal, that we should forget what's happened, or even telling us to apologize, these are the same tactics of abusers. And I'm a survivor of sexual assault. And I haven't told many people that in my life. But when we go through trauma compounds on each other.
Okay, so a couple of things. One, sexual assault is something that ought to be treated with the utmost seriousness, the utmost care. When people talk about sexual assault, it should not be done cavalierly. Sexual assault, and I'm not suggesting that she's talking about her own sexual assault cavalierly there. I don't think she is. Okay, sexual assault is, in my opinion, the worst crime a human being can commit against another human being. I've long suggested that rape should be punishable by death. I think it is a worse crime in many cases than murder. Rape is just a horrific thing, obviously. So, two things can be true at once, as always. One, sexual assault is a grave matter, a supremely grave matter. The gravest crime one person can commit on another person. Second, to compare sexual assault to people you disagree with politically, saying that impeachment is unnecessary at this point for a person who did not actually participate in the Capitol riots, Trump, that is an injustice. It's an injustice. Okay, the suggestion that the people she was talking about there were Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, the senators, who have both suggested that we should move on in terms of impeachment, right? Not that we should forget what happened on January 6th. Not that the criminals of January 6th shouldn't be punished, but that impeaching Trump at this point, he's already out of office, so there's constitutional questions there, or linking him directly via modes of incitement to the activity at the Capitol building, that the evidence isn't there for that. To compare those people to rapists, which is what she's doing right there, that's an ugly thing to do. It's a really ugly thing to do. And you're not granted unlimited license to compare people to your sexual assaulter because you have suffered a sexual assault. Okay, that the person who is comparable to the sexual assaulter is the sexual assaulter who should be in prison, who should be in jail. I hope to God that she goes to the police and whoever sexually assaulted her ends up in prison because that's where they belong at a minimum. But the attempt to suggest that Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz are like abusers who want you to forget about the abuse, to compare them to people who have engaged in sexual assault is truly extraordinary. And this is coming from the same Congresswoman who in the past week has suggested that Ted Cruz tried to have her murdered without evidence, which is, again, normally when you allege that somebody is an accessory to murder, you ought to have some evidence to that effect. Otherwise, this makes you a false witness. There are biblical commandments against such things. So what is the actual goal here? The actual goal here is to malign anyone who you disagree with politically or disagrees with you on impeachment as not only complicit in that, but complicit in the worst crimes available to humankind. And that's really inappropriate stuff from a sitting congressperson. That, again, that is not to undercut anything that she says about the trauma she experienced during the day. That is not to undercut anything that she has said about the trauma of her experience as a sexual assault survivor. It is to suggest that you don't get to compare people to sexual assaulters without evidence that they have committed sexual assault, the worst crime you can commit against another human being. And you certainly don't get to do it on the basis that they disagree with you about impeachment of a person who's already out of office and who, in my opinion, didn't commit an impeachable offense anyway in using inflammatory, inappropriate, and ugly language. I mean, if the new standard is that if you use inflammatory, ugly language in order to, quote unquote, incite an uprising, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has some explaining to do. Here is AOC justifying Black Lives Matter violence during the summer. Here, I mean, again, I don't think that she should be impeached from Congress for this. Here is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doing this, again, during the summer. A little bit of a flashback here.
If you're trying to call for the end of unrest, but you don't believe healthcare is a human right, if you're afraid to say Black Lives Matter, if you're too scared to call out police brutality, then you aren't asking for an end of unrest. You are asking for injustice to continue and for your people to continue to endure the violence of poverty, the violence of a lack of housing access, the violence of police brutality, and not say a damn thing. That's what you're asking for.
Okay, so again, there she was using logic during the summer, basically suggesting that if you're not calling for universal health care, then you ought to just be okay with the riots that were happening during the summer. I mean, that's as inflammatory as anything that Trump said in the lead up to January 6th. So if the goal here in an impeachment trial is to demonstrate causality, if the goal in an impeachment trial is to demonstrate actual incitement, you're going to have to do better than what Trump did on January 6th. And so that's why my deep suspicion here is that for Democrats, this is all a PR move. I mean, Joe Biden has basically said that. Joe Biden has said that he understands that there is not going to be a conviction here, that essentially this is all about just browbeating Republicans who didn't have anything to do with January 6th, and many of whom were in the same exact rooms as Democrats waiting to be preyed upon, and lumping all of those people in. And you wonder why Republicans are, again, suspicious of impeachment. It's because of exactly this type of move. Facts don't care about your feelings, and it's a fact that The Ben Shapiro Show is the largest conservative podcast in the nation. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our content.